Hello and welcome to Dojo Live this Wednesday, July 3rd, 2024. Today we're recapping Phocuswright Europe 2024, which was held in Barcelona through June 10th through 12th. It was an event that brought together influential travel leaders from all around the globe, which is very fun, and of course provided a platform to dive into important issues facing the industry within a variety of formats: one-on-one conversation, center stage, roundtable, you know the drill. Unfortunately, I didn't get to attend myself, and neither did my co-host Sridhar Padmanabhan, who's back there somewhere. Hey, Sridhar. But our returning guest, Alejandro Gomez, Vice President of Revenue with Hollybob, did get to go. Welcome back to Dojo Live, Alejandro. It's always great to see you.
Kim, Shrid, thank you very much for having me today.
No, it's our pleasure. And thank you so much for sharing with us what your experience at Phocuswright 2024 was like, those valuable insights, what's happening in the industry, and of course, some really amazing networking tips. We're looking forward to it. So real quick, I think for those who might not know you like we know you, can you give us a bit about your background and what it is that you do with Hollybob?
Yeah, so I'm VP of Revenue at Hollybob. I've been with the company for the last 2 years. Hollybob is a travel technology company that works on the tours and activities space, helping deliver the right product to the right person at the right time through the right channel. And part of us attending Phocuswright was also getting a sense check of the latest developments in the industry, be that consolidation, being that changes to customer acquisition strategies, looking at new innovation and applied uses of AI. So there's a little bit of that, and that's my role. So it's generate revenue for the company, but also staying close to colleagues and network and what's coming up in the industry.
Exactly. You know, you already answered my first question. I think with that introduction, a very good one about what motivated you to attend Phocuswright Europe. And so you could add a little bit more flavor to that if you'd like, but also just sum up your experience if you could, and in just a few words, what might they be?
I mean, first of all, what prompted us to go is like we're regular attendees of the show, right? So we do that. I think it's something that you need to do, definitely. So Phocuswright is one of those conferences that you need to attend in the year, not only for the network opportunity and the learning. It's more about also being connected to what's next, right? And I think that Phocuswright has done a fantastic job from the research point of view, also from the network point of view. There's other things that I always give feedback on what they can do next, or what they might do better. Does that answer your question, Kim?
Yeah, it absolutely does. I think in our pre-show conversation, you also talked about one of the benefits of Phocuswright Europe, particularly being that it's less crowded, fewer people, which then means more meetings and ultimately better discussion.
Yeah, and it's interesting you bring that up because I actually heard it from someone else that attended the show with me on another company, and the different point of view was, well, this person is based in Canada. Hopefully he's looking at the show today and he knows that I'm talking about him. But he was saying how fun it was that you got more meaningful conversations done when it's less of a crowd, but with pre-qualified or pre-vetoed interest on what you're going to say. And then, which compared to the event in the US, which you definitely also should attend, but it feels more trade show transactional, right? Because of the volume and the sheer scale of things and all people attending. It's just a matter of market size, and then the ability to talk to people that can be interesting for future collaboration. I used it as like a comparison, like having M&A and corporate development like one-on-ones on the US show is much more difficult. Here, it was a big part of the show a couple of weeks back, because I think that, first of all, there were a couple of movements in the industry that came from like corporate development or M&A, like we've seen it all around the news, right? So TravelPerk picking up Amtra, or TravelSoft picking up Travelgate X on the hotel distribution landscape, and other businesses. They did Adcore as well, right? So I think that made a lot of people say, well, this is a good place to actually test waters at this stage of the year, because the capital markets have still not recovered in full, but there's still capital to deploy, right, with the beginning of 2024 compared to 2023. And now people have started saying, okay, I'm going to listen to them. I'm going to listen to a pitch. I'm going to look at the let's just say, the business metrics and see whether it makes sense to start betting on some of these October, November, December, right? Again, it's kind of funny because I think a lot of people also came because of what's happening outside of travel. For example, I was reading today, this is actual numbers, that 62 countries around the world are having elections this year, plus the EU. So there's going to be a lot of stuff that comes out of that impacts our industry.
Absolutely.
So it was a very fun read this morning, and kind of getting insights from that and see what might have made someone this time say, okay, I'm going to go to Barcelona. It feels smaller, but the quality of the discussions are better.
I love that. I love that. In terms of numbers, do you have an approximation of how many people were there?
I mean, you know me. I'm being recorded, and I think Phocuswright will give an exacter figure than this. But I would say like between the 800s to the 1,000 was like a good like ballpark figure. Yeah, I mean 800 or so. Like you saw a lot of attendance in the different roundtables hosted, different center stages. There's also good attendance on the innovation, like what they call the innovation lab, the startup competition. So I mean that is a good number, and it made sense for that kind of venue and event.
Absolutely, for sure. I think there were some kind of interesting interactions you had. If you want to share this on air, I think even coming up and down escalators, there was the ability to see people and mix all over the place.
Yeah, and again, this came up on a call I had today, like for day-to-day work, right? So it was interesting that I was basically at the bottom of a staircase with another CEO, and we see someone coming from BC, and I just said hi because I knew him from before, and he was not only very welcoming, so to my benefit, but when we started discussing what we did at Holybob and how we saw ecosystem and how do we get together to work as an industry, he said, yes, I've been telling a couple other companies that if I was able to piece together some of your offerings as a joint thing to take to hospitality, we would have like a very, I dare say, revolutionary value proposition to take. Like it feels that a lot of people are taking this siloed approach. I think we discussed it last time on the episode, where people are solving different bits of a problem. But if you have the ability to look at it systemically, and you're able to put those 2 or 3 companies or solutions together, then you have a killer value proposition for part of the industry. So I'll give you an example. So one of these conversations was with a company that does upgrade technology for airlines, and they already have gotten into where you would get the data from the airlines, which then would funnel into our recommendation engine and personalization, so that we can then siphon it back to them so that they can display it at the right time at the right place for that audience, right? But he feels that they solve the ingestion of the data and the initial, let's just say, upgrade bidding part of things. And now that we're putting all of these personalization engine on top, if we put it together, it makes a lot more sense. So, I mean, these are early conversations that get us very excited. But then if they materialize, they have an impact to really change the way travel is sold today. Whether you call it merchandising or whether you call it retailing, it's basically the same, as long as you get a better consumer journey and a better consumer experience. And at the end of the day, you can prove the conversion behind it.
Right.
Perfect. I think that the collaboration piece is something that we heard a lot too at High Tech, where we just came back from that. We'll have a recap next week, of course, but it's really beautiful to hear that you that and just this openness and this willingness and this ideation that happens, and that wouldn't otherwise happen if you weren't probably wouldn't otherwise happen if you didn't have the opportunity to network and in person and see things and then get the gears turning, right?
Yeah, and I think I shared this with another company that does this, right? So we were having a discussion with our team, and they said, "What is it that you lack the most when you attend one of these trade shows?" Right? And I said that it's always very guided for me. Like outside of big OTA killing self-guided tours, which is for another episode if we want to discuss that. But if we take the guided principle, I mean, it's okay for part of the audience, but when you get to a point of maturity in the industry, you actually need to start thinking outside guided. You need to start thinking outside of the box. And for me, what was interesting about these discussions and these interactions, I mean, they might start as you attending one of the panel sessions. Like, I'll give you an example. You see people, well, you see Maud Belly from Accor doing Beyond the Bed. And you now start listening to hotel thought leaders saying it's not about the hotel, it's about how people feel within the hotel or connected to that in-destination experience. And then you take it from there and say, okay, so what is the problem we need to solve for people feeling better in that during that experience? And what I meant with my guided comment is, if that was only just the stage setting, right? And you go and consume knowledge and then you leave, it doesn't really create anything new. So what I was telling this team today was, why don't you propose kind of a design thinking session instead of a roundtable, which is more like, okay, we have a topic and we're going to chat about it, and whoever thinks what it is, that's fine. Let's just propose it in a different way. Let's just say, we all know that we have this issue, right? So, and I'll use an example. We all know that acquiring consumers in travel is very difficult, very expensive, and very much dominated by Google, right? So you come with a problem and say, if we work collaboratively, how are we going to solve it? And then you will start hearing dissent within that same session, most likely, because it's like, well, I would do it like this because it solves the hotel problem. Yeah, but that kills my airline flow. And then I don't have the ability to sell ancillaries. And when you start thinking like that, you come to common understanding of, well, if I do this for you, then you can do this for me. You can start working as an ecosystem. And at the end of the day, you come up with something new, something that goes beyond what you actually have at the moment. And I think that was interesting. And you get it. I don't necessarily think it's about the size of the show. It's about how you set it up so that those conversations are nurtured. And again, making sure that everyone feels comfortable of sharing this, right? I'm sharing it on air today, but you have to give people the reassurance that this is either going to be treated, let's just use the word confidentiality, or like it will be treated confidential, or it is within the sanctity of this trade show and this exercise that this happens. So there's no strings attached. This is not going to publicly be posted if you don't want to, right? Because some people want to have the discussions behind closed doors, but at least having them done is I think is the first step, right? And it also, I think, happened because there was less representation of the big logos, and there was a lot more people from smaller to mid-scale companies actually trying to find pockets of opportunity within the industry, right? So yeah, I think it was very interesting. And if I can give some feedback to like trade show companies, let's call it like that, or research companies doing the trade shows around the world, is I think the consumption of knowledge in this day and age has become easier. So I can just still go and listen to someone like ourselves share some knowledge about things. That's all fine. But the resolution of actual problems and coming up with ideas is an actual opportunity that they haven't really tapped on. I think that's super powerful, right? So forget about the main stage stuff, because we've all heard big OTAs or big airlines, everything say pretty much the same thing for the last 5 to 10 years with like new AI put on it or not. That doesn't really solve. But we never said, well, this is how we think about solving this problem. And that would be super interesting.
That would be interesting. How would one even go about planning that? Like, I don't know.
Well,
what do you visualize? Like breakout rooms where you choose the conversation you want to have?
Kim, this was a conversation I wanted to, I was thinking about it before, but Alejandro also mentioned. So Alejandro, I mean, we've all been to various conferences, industry conferences and so on. How long was Phocuswright? Like 3 business days, or?
It was 3 business days, run from Monday. What was interesting is that it started on a Monday. So like trade show theory would say you never start on a Monday and you never end on a Friday because people either don't show up because they're late for their flight or they don't show up because they already left. But they did it Monday through Wednesday, and there was a healthy participation level.
Right. So what? I mean, I had one question, and then it became a two-parter because of what you said. I think one question was that there is, bumping into each other that is going on, and then there is, the big sessions, right? The big sessions, the keynotes, and various other things. Partly to do with Phocuswright, but partly in general, you've also been to your share of conferences. If you had to, let's say, take a version 0.1 stab at, hey, try this. Like, would you do keynote, breakouts, meetings as an open space for meetings, and then more breakouts, keynotes in the afternoon? I mean, I'm just asking, how would we do it? Because I've seen where it's useful to have a breakout in the morning, I mean, a keynote in the morning, but also have something at like the 3:30, 4 o'clock time frame, so people actually have a reason to be around and not just take off for drinks and things like that, right? So I'm just asking you your opinion because I just went to high tech recently. I told you, and I saw the same thing. I mean, Kim was also there. We had like a whole black hole day in between where there was exhibition, but the people who would come for the sessions because it wasn't there may or may not have shown up for the exhibition, right? So
yeah, and it's not only that, Sridhar. So I'll use high tech and I'll relate it to Phocuswright. So I'll give you an example. So you buy your ticket for Phocuswright, like it's very well organized. You get the app and everything, but then it comes to a point where you need to decide whether I want to use it for lead gen, I want to use it for network, or I want to use it for knowledge consumption. And that in itself presents a conflict, right? Because I want to do all three. So first problem that I have. So the thing is, when you schedule the agenda, you need to think, okay, this is the day that you do potentially network, right? Roundtable, breakout rooms, open discussions, and everything. Then there's the second day where you say, hey, if I get the audience to say this is only the, let's just say the lead gen stuff, like where we want to secure meetings and do speed dating like other people, you don't make it conflict with the agenda, right? Because you don't put, I'm going to use names that everyone knows in this industry. You don't put Brian from Airbnb to talk at the same time as you're trying to make a very serious lead gen meeting, right? Because I want to be there listening to Brian while at the same time I need to kind of generate new revenue for Holland. So I think that is, you need to think that people most likely have different objectives to fulfill at the same time within the trade show. And it doesn't become just an agenda play. So
exactly.
So you organize it. But then the other thing that and I'll kind of connect it with my previous comment is, I think there's a lot of synergy to be won if you don't make it difficult to have those discussions. So I would actually say, like, you have the startups presenting, like Hollywood has been there in the past, like I appreciate that. That's one thing. But the other thing would be, okay, let's make sure these people connect, brain power unite. And then what does that look like in my mind is like, okay, we're gonna have the challenge module within high tech or Phocuswright. And you do a poll before everyone gets in, and then you present the result on day one and say, well, the single most biggest problem pointed out by all of you was X. So now day 3 has all morning, which starts with a breakfast. We're going to split you in groups, and you need to solve this problem. By the end of the day, we want a solution. So hackathon kind of style.
Exactly, right?
But with people from different places, right? So like, hey, this is just a bunch of like misfits and people that didn't know each other, but they work in the same industry and they share the same passion for making travel the biggest thing after vanilla ice cream, right? I think that's what we want to do. And then you come up with a solution. And then potentially that is kind of the startup approach to it, is whoever comes out with the cleverest solution gets spotlighted in Phocuswright or Phocuswire, or gets a voucher. Like, there's a million things you can do with that, but then you make it engaging so that everyone participates. And if you want to keep it as behind closed doors, that's fine. But at least you've kind of achieved your first objective, which was get people together to discuss what really matters.
Right. And Totally agree, Alejo. I think the hackathon approach is not something that has been tried in many of these conferences, whether it's travel or otherwise. Another thought that I had was that, you know, hey, you already got the slides from the key attendees for a keynote or something like that beforehand, right? It should be pretty simple to push it out at the end of the session, right? And say,
Yeah.
hey, confidential to participants only, push it out. Number one. Number two, hey, auto generated captions or some such thing. I'm not asking for AI generated summary, that would be great, but auto generated captions, right? Because otherwise I'm transcribing and I'm trying to make bullet points and I'm trying to take a picture of the screen with my phone and share it with somebody. By the time I get around to that, I got to go to the next. Anyway, I'm just saying little things that, and then keep maybe a conversation thread open. Like, for example, you know,
Yeah.
I mean, if you have a YouTube TED talk, you can see the comments over there, right? So have a conversation thread going where only the people in the conference can, remark, exchange notes with each other or some such thing. So I was just thinking quite a few things these conferences can do a little bit differently, right?
I mean, what's insane is that other solutions or other parts of our life had already done
Hmm?
that, right?
The consumer
Uh,
tech is way ahead of these things, right?
so we have communities in Facebook. You could, I mean, what's mind-boggling is that travel, which is one of the most communal things in the world, feels very little communal when you go to the straight shows. Like it feels very transactional.
To be fair,
So
all trade shows. I mean,
no, I mean, I'm not talking about Phocuswright alone at the moment. I
Yeah,
think that it's good feedback for everyone to say, how do you keep everyone engaged past the point of entry and
yeah,
departure, right? So how do you make this a living thing, right? So that was my thinking coming in today, right? So Phocuswright doesn't necessarily need to end,
correct.
right?
Exactly.
So it's an extension of my day to day, right? So
Exactly.
and Phocuswright or Skift, I mean, I'm going to be very interested. You see the differences between the different shows, right? And I think what I saw that was highly, let's just say, positive this time is that the size and the kind of people that attended potentially make some of these things possible
Mhm.
because you see things with common values and common beliefs in travel and common desire for travel to becoming a transformative power for humanity, right? So you see that you start picking it up, and then there's people that are controversial with some things and people that are vocal with others, but at least I think everyone wants to go in the same direction of making this great and making sure that it works, right? So um, if you unpack a lot of the other stuff, then you see the kind of keynote speakers that you had, the kind of on stage that you had, also go in that same line. So while you do that and while you get different kind of speakers and everything, um, I think if you get to that next level of iteration for a trade show,
Yeah.
I mean, maybe we're just discussing that potentially we love trade shows as they are, but they could be
leveled up.
way better,
Mhm.
right? So what does that look like, right? And potentially, this goes back to our earlier statement. Maybe not my problem to solve, but I just want to share feedback and insights so that the problem gets solved.
Right.
Yep.
Right?
Exactly. Talking about feedback, insights, and I don't know how many different conferences and shows that you've been to, but utilizing your expertise, your networking experience. I think you mentioned something about coming in with like 40 or something meetings already booked. What do you have in terms of like advice, tips for those who want to up their networking game, both prior to the shows as well as at the event itself?
I mean, yeah, and you raise a good point where we're coming into the call, right, Kim? So first of all, you need to be open to making sure that everyone knows that you're attending, right? So that's one thing. You also need to generate the interest. Like it's not spamming people, and if I have spammed someone, I publicly apologize for that now. But the thing is, I'm looking for that opportunity to build ecosystem, right? That's my approach when I set up those 40, 50 meetings. Some of them I need to because they're either good friends or like past colleagues and you want to keep that. But I'm also looking at all, like part of my strategy is talk to someone that I have no commonality with, right? It might feel far-fetched, but I'm actually seeing what value can Alejandro bring to that company from my past experience related to Holy Bob or not. But then we can have more meaningful discussions on top of that, right? So again, if you're just doing it for the pure lead gen play, then it becomes a transactional exercise, right? So you might need to be willing, like I did this in Miami, and hopefully this person is also listening to the show today. It's like I went and met a company that's revolutionizing how first aid is being delivered to airplanes, right? So airlines. Does that have anything to do with Hollybob? No. But it now opened 3 different discussions with people doing technology that might serve to connect with data that's on the plane so that we can personalize things to do for airline customers.
Right.
And you never know how that is going to end. So you need, I mean, if I put that in simple words, so be open and transparent, make yourself available, and also be open-minded, right? So, I mean, sometimes I think we've gotten to a point, this is something I do regret in travel, is we got into a point as an industry where people just shut down things on subject matter lines, if you know what I mean. And I think you need to spend the time I mean, it's difficult. I won't deny it, but sometimes I get those emails where you say, well, this is not for us. But then I take the conscious time to go into it and say, well, maybe there is a little glimpse of light at the end of this tunnel. Let's explore it. If you dedicate the amount of time that you can, and that you're like honest and also transparent as what that might be, and conscious of your own time, and not overpromise or underdeliver, then I think that is a good exercise. Because again, I was booked for 45 meetings. I made 92% of them. So I measure also my efficiency after the trade show. And I would say that some of them might not materialize, but it was a good learning and intellectual exercise to connect with someone that might pitch something to me. And I might have feedback about his pitch or feedback about the idea, or I might be intrigued about it. And now we're discussing something else. And I always look for the opportunities for Hollybob and our company, right? So you raise a good point. I think you start early, or as early as the trade show would allow you, right? Because not all trade shows make the networking opportunity open to everyone. But as soon as you get that, you should. And it doesn't start with like a transactional approach. It's more about, I'm going to be there. Do you want to chat? Do you want to catch up? What is it that we can discuss together that might take us to the next level of this discussion, or just spark some idea that we can present together at the show or explore with someone else? And I think even that's what the travel industry is all about. Like a lot of us have been more years than we would care to say in this industry, and we've seen a thing or two happen, right? So if you put that to use, then you're using past to build future, right? And that's how I see it. And with lead gen, it's super important to do that.
Yeah, I like the mentality of you have very little to lose, right? At the very worst, you've met an interesting person and had a nice conversation.
I mean, let me put it this way. If hotels had thought that way 30 years ago, then there would be no OTAs, because in their trade shows, they would be talking how we make better guest consumer experience, best distribution, better worldwide support, better cross-border payments. So, but they never cared to actually have that discussion.
Wow. If that's not a word for the wise, then a lookout. A great warning. You know, I think that's a great word of wisdom to wrap up on. We do have about a minute or so left, and I just wanted to wrap this up with this idea of reflecting on everything that you saw, heard, talked about at Phocuswright Europe 2024. What were some trends or innovations that really popped out for you in the industry that you think people should pay attention to and that you're excited about? And ultimately also what that means for Hollybob.
Yeah, so I appreciate your and Shudar's time today. So first and foremost, I think that things that resonated with me. So seeing hoteliers think beyond the room and think beyond the property was super important. Seeing moves from hospitality companies outside of build versus buy was also important. So I'm referring to Accor and the announcement with the Amadeus CRS, but it applies to a lot of people that have now started to think beyond their own borders. I saw a lot of young leaders, which makes me very happy. Obviously, I'm not one of them, but a lot of startups, a lot of young leaders. And I saw, well, I mean, Gen AI or AI and all of its flavors, shapes, and forms was partly discussed. I think that it was also interesting to see, again, that tying into future strategy. What do we build? maybe the weighing down of like kind of itinerary building companies using AI trend that we saw in past or bottom half of last year, and how that now AI is being challenged into how do we use it to make it productive or to a productive end. And then again, at the end of the day, I saw a big number of startups. So that I feel that's very healthy. So that people still bet on our industry. And what it means for Hollywood is that we have more people to talk to. We have more people to design, think the future. And I saw more openness of the use of the data and thinking the customer journey through and through, like end to end. So we don't want to own the consumer journey. We just want to be a part of it and make sure that it's great. And I think that's the bright future for Hollywood.
I love that. I love that. Thank you so much, Alejandro, for sharing your experience, insights, and advice with us today. We look forward to more conversations with you in the days and months and weeks and years to come. Sridhar, of course, always a pleasure speaking with you as well here on Dojo Live. For those of you listening in, if you also attended Phocuswright Europe 2024, please share your thoughts and experiences with us on YouTube, to LinkedIn, and elsewhere, many platforms that you're watching us. We'd love to hear from you. And of course, don't forget about the U.S. counterpart coming up in Phoenix, Arizona. That will be in November. Also, it looks like a 3-day session, the 19th through the 21st. And finally, you can join us next week. That will be Thursday, the 11th, for our recap of High Tech 2024, which just wrapped up out of Charlotte, North Carolina. I'll be joined by David Tressler of Provision Partners, as well as Sridhar and a few other of the attendees. So don't miss it, 10 o'clock a.m. Pacific. And until then, stay safe, everyone. And bye for now.